Hey, students and parents, this is Mr. Anderson, the Career and College Counselor at CV. And one of the questions I get asked so often is about college entrance tests. So I thought I'd make a quick video about that just to kind of answer as many of the questions that I can cover here in this little video. Um, what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about what are college entrance tests, how do I sign up for them, when should I take them, how do I prepare for them, and then I'm going to give you some final thoughts here at the end. One of the things that I think is always important is no matter what grade level you're in, you should start thinking about it now. Start planning for it. If going to a university is something that you want to do, just understand that this is something that you should start thinking about even as early as freshman year. Not to necessarily take them that early, but to plan out your strategy and your timing for how you're going to cover them. All right, so let's start with what are college entrance tests. So college entrance tests are typically they serve two purposes. Number one, they help kind of give you a gauge on whether you're ready for college level work. And then the other part is it gives colleges an opportunity to compare you against other people. Because when they're trying to compare students across the country from different high schools in different states and different educational systems, it's hard to be able to compare apples to apples. And so this allows them to kind of do that. Now, I will talk about this later, but many colleges are putting less and less emphasis on college entrance tests. But I'll tell why it's all important here at the end. So again, what are they? So the SAT and ACT, those are the two college entrance tests that are used across our country. And yes, they are both used a lot. I know that here in Washington State, we hear primarily about the SAT. But if you go to other states in the country, you'll actually hear more about the ACT than the SAT. Both are taken at all the colleges across our country. So it doesn't matter which one that you take. What really does matter is which one are you going to do better on, because colleges want to see your best. They are willing to see all of them. They'll look at all of your scores, and really they will only care about which one is the actual best. They understand that it's just a test, that it's just one day and how you perform on that test for one day. But that's why they don't mind if you take them multiple times, and they do care about which one you do best on. So the ACT has four main sections. It has English, reading, math, and science. I'll probably mention this again, but the science section really isn't science. The science section, a lot of students just call it the charts and graphs section, because while the topic is around science, you don't need to know actually science knowledge to be successful on that section of the ACT. You just need to be really good at reading charts and graphs, and usually you're going to do fine. That critical thinking skill, that deduction skill that you would use in a science class can be applied here, but it's not necessarily science knowledge. The SAT also has four sections, but you'll notice it's reading and writing, and it's math. There is no science section. And the evidence-based part of the reading and writing is they'll oftentimes give you a something to read where you're gathering evidence out of that reading. So that's kind of what it is. The SAT does have two math sections on it, which is different than the ACT. The SAT has the first math section, which is a shorter section where you cannot use a calculator, and then a longer section where you can use a calculator. The ACT, you can use your calculator on the entire math section. Here are just kind of some of the basic things that are on the ACT. You'll notice that the English section is 75 minutes, the math is 60. There are a lot of different things. I would encourage you to take practice tests, and I'll talk about this again, so that you can kind of see, kind of in practice, how all these topics are covered. But this is what's on the ACT. Here's what's on the SAT. Again, you'll notice that the math section is in, it's in a 1 55-minute calculator optional section and 1 25-minute no calculator section. When you notice the ACT, it does go up all the way through Algebra 2. It'll cover trigonometry. The SAT does go into Algebra 2 as well, but it doesn't really cover a lot of trigonometry. A lot of people will say that the SAT math section has some challenges because they actually have some what's called student produced responses, where it's not just multiple choice. You actually have to figure out the answer and write it in. The ACT covers a little bit more advanced math. So those are just kind of some comparisons. In terms of how they're scored completely different. The ACT is scored on a scale of 1 to 36, and you get a score in each of the 4 sections, so English, math, reading, and science, on a scale of 1 to 36. And then you will always get a composite score too, which is an average of the 4 sections. Again, that's on also a scale of 1 to 36. The SAT, again, is scored very differently. It's scored on a scale of 400 to 1600. There are 3 scores that you get on your score report. You'll get an evidence-based reading and writing score on a scale of 2 to 800, and then a math score on 2 to 800, and then your total score is the combined score of your reading and writing and your math. So it's not an average, it's a combined score. So that's how they're scored. I do have some information on a sheet that's both in Google Classroom and on our website. I just want you to know that it has a lot of this information on it, as well as all the dates. So how do you actually sign up for these tests? Well, you sign up for them completely online and not through the high school. In fact, we don't actually offer the ACT or the SAT at CV at any time during the year. You'll have to go to another testing location for it. So for the ACT, you go to actstudent.org. You'll have to create an account, and it takes a little while to do that because they ask you a lot of research type questions too. You register for your test, you pick your location, you pay for the test, and then you print an admissions ticket. That admissions ticket is what you need to have on the day of testing in order to get into the test. For the SAT, you go to sat.collegeboard.org. You create an account, and that takes you a little while, so make sure to plan for that. You register for the test, you pick your location, you pay for the test, then you print your admissions ticket. Sound familiar? Both of them are actually fairly similar in terms of the approach to how you actually sign up for the test. Here's one thing that you do need to know. Make sure that you have available and ready for you for either one of these tests a picture of yourself that is fairly close up. So basically covers like your shoulders and up, because you'll need to end up submitting a picture as part of your registration. That picture will then be on your admissions ticket. And then when you go in to actually test, you'll need to have an ID card that can verify that it's the same person on the ID card to what's on the admissions ticket. They're offered it throughout the school year. So the ACT is offered September, October, December, February, April, and June. They do offer some in July at very select locations. At least last year we didn't have really any locations that were offering it in July in our region. But there are some that are offering it in July. For the SAT, it's offered in August, October, November, December, March, May, and June. The August one ends up being a really popular one for our students because it's before school year starts. And so a lot of them like it that way because they can get one of those tests in before they have to worry about the rest of their schooling. So you'll notice that they are offered each 7 times a year. This next year, because of COVID-19, SAT is adding an additional testing date in September to try and give students another opportunity to test. But typically this is when they're offered, and they have been offered like this for, 10, 12 years. Now, in terms of the cost, the ACT and the SAT are both close in terms of the total cost. They're about $50 in terms of, and that's without the writing or the essay section. If you add the writing or essay section, which would be at the end of the test, that'd be $68 or about $65 depending upon the test. There is a late registration fee if you register in a short window after the deadline. And then if you're wanting to change your date or location, there's an additional fee on that. I know it's kind of frustrating, but it's just how it is. A lot of students will ask about that writing or essay section. I just say try and take it at least once because it is quite an additional cost. and most colleges don't care about it. Um, Students ask all the time, are there fee waivers? Or sometimes, unfortunately, they don't ask that. And what I want you to know is absolutely there are fee waivers for it. You have to qualify for it. It's not something we can just give out. Typically, the easiest way to qualify for a fee waiver is to be on free or reduced lunch. There are also fee waivers if you're in foster care, if you're homeless or in the McKinney-Vento program or the HEART program. There are a couple other, but the easiest way to qualify for it is if you're on free or reduced lunch. You have to get the fee waivers from your counselor. That's the only person that can end up giving those out. You get a unique fee waiver number on what they're going to give you. So you don't want to lose that because the counselors only have a very limited number of those. But that unique number you then put into the system when you're registering online, and it just waives the entire fee. You're allowed 2 fee waivers a year. There are some other benefits, so I would check out their websites to see. Especially the SAT has added a lot of additional benefits to actually getting fee waivers, including college application fee waivers and some other resources. So just check those out on their website. So after you take your test, you want to make sure that those scores are able to be sent to the colleges. And a lot of students, unfortunately, do not indicate colleges at the time when they register to actually have their scores sent because they sit there and say, well, I don't know where I'm going to go yet. And while I know that, when each time that you take the SAT or ACT, you're allowed to send those to 4 colleges for free, both on the SAT and ACT. So I would encourage you, if you've narrowed it down to even your top 4, you should put those in there even if that changes. They will only care about your scores if you end up completing an application, but you at least want those scores in there. After that point, if you try and send your scores, each time you send it to each one, it's $13 on the ACT and it's $12 for the SAT. Fee waivers can apply for those, so that part's good. But it's pretty expensive to send them afterwards. So one thing that I would always suggest is if you know any colleges that require the test to be sent or your scores to be sent from the testing agency directly from ACT or SAT, make sure to choose those for your top 4. For example, University of Washington will not accept test scores from the high school. WSU does. So you would definitely want to have UW on your list to get the score report from the SAT or ACT. You don't have to put WSU on there. Montana State also requires them sent directly from SAT or ACT. So just be looking into that as you're looking at colleges. All right, so the other big question I always get asked is, when should I take them? And that's a good question, and it requires kind of a complicated answer. The short answer is you should take them during your junior year, for sure. You should only take them during your senior year if you need a higher score for colleges or scholarships, but not to be the first time that you take it. This year with COVID-19 might be a little bit different. I understand that. But I'm just saying, on a general rule, you should take it junior year as your first time, not senior year for your first time. You're only really taking it senior year if you're needing to retake it for a higher score. You absolutely should plan on taking it multiple times. Colleges typically take your highest score, and you always want to take both to see which one feels better, and then primarily just retest in the one that feels better or the one that you get the highest score in. And by the way, colleges also do something called super scoring, where they'll take the highest section score from each of the times that you take it, and they'll create a new composite or total score. That's why it benefits you to take it multiple times. But I'll just tell you this, the first time that you take it, you're going to have a lot of anxiety. You're going to be very nervous. It's going to be at a place you maybe haven't ever been to in the past. And so I would encourage you to take it multiple times, because the first time your score is typically lower because you were the most nervous. The second time, the scores oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes will go up a little bit. Now, when specifically in your junior year you should take it really depends on when you take Algebra 2. And this part's important. So if you take Algebra 2 before your junior year, I would suggest that you take your first SAT or ACT between August and December of your junior year. Now, I know some students that take it like even at the end of their sophomore year. That's totally fine. But if you've taken Algebra 2 before this year, you want to try and get through as much Algebra 2 as possible before you take it for the first time because it covers all the way through Algebra 2. So I would suggest the first time to be between August and December of your junior year. If you're taking Algebra 2 during your junior year, I would take your first SAT or ACT between February and April of your junior year. That way you get an opportunity to get through as much of the Algebra 2 as possible, but not waiting too late. And so it would make it a little bit more difficult to finish your applications for college. So again, that's taking it for your first time. If you took that for your first time, depending upon when you take Algebra 2, that still gives you an opportunity to retake, but in June of your junior year for a second time. So if you took it one time in the fall, if you took Algebra 2 before your junior year, or if you're taking it during the spring, if you're taking Algebra 2 during your junior year, again, you can still get your score report back and register for the June SAT or ACT. And then you can, again, keep taking it during your senior year if you need that higher score. All right, so how do you prepare for these tests? Because you can see that colleges do use them for admissions. They do use them for scholarships. So how do you end up preparing for them? Well, the best way to prepare for them is practice tests. It increases your familiarity of the type of questions that they ask. You understand how they ask the question. You're not as nervous after you've taken practice tests, so it does decrease your stress. And it allows you to focus on your weaknesses. So if you took a practice test and you found out, I'm not doing real well on the math section, well, then you can focus most of your time on the math section to try and get your score up. Or maybe the reading section, you're just taking too long to read through the sections, well, then you can practice that before you take the official time. So honestly, the practice tests are the most important. And one thing I will emphasize is practice your timing. It is so critical. The SAT averages about 70 seconds per question. The ACT averages about 50 seconds per question. So does that mean the ACT is easier? No, not at all. They're really about the same. It depends on you and your personality. For example, I have a student who he took both tests and did significantly better on the ACT. And that's because he processes quickly and was able to deduce the answer quickly. And so the timing worked out perfect for him. The extra time on the SAT didn't help him because he was making early decisions anyways. However, his sister did the exact opposite because she looked like to take her time and really think through her answers before actually deciding on the answer. She really struggled with the timing on the ACT. And so keep that in mind, and the best way to prepare for that is just to practice. That doesn't mean if you're a fast test taker, ACT you're going to do better on. Not necessarily. It might feel a little more comfortable. And if you're a slow test taker, SAT might feel a little more comfortable, but you have to kind of see the individual questions and the sections to really see which one you're going to do better on. Now, in terms of practice tests, we do offer several at CV. We offer the PSAT NMSQT for 11th graders in October. NMSQT stands for the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. That's the PSAT serves that purpose. We also offer a pre-ACT, and typically we've offered that in December to 10th and 11th graders. Every year that changes a little bit depending upon the schedule. And then we also offer a PSAT 10 in March. And while we offered the PSAT 9 this year as a pilot, it wasn't all that helpful. So we're going to try to expand the PSAT 10 to 9th and 10th graders, just to offer that to all those students that want to be able to test on that. So typically, again, we offer that in March. That is one of the best options because those tests feel very official. We treat them like it's official because it is an official test. Especially the PSAT NMSQT is a scholarship competition too. And so there are a lot of rules that we have to follow. And so it feels stressful, just like the SAT does. That is why, of all the practice tests, taking these ones will feel the most like the real test and will help you prepare the best. There are also some online SAT and ACT practice. I want to highlight two of them here. For the ACT, there's academy.act.org. It's a free site that they've put together. It has videos and practice problems. It is a fairly new resource. It's only been around, I think, for 2 years now. It's getting better each year that it's been around. I encourage you to use it. It has been helpful for some of the students that have really dug into that and used it. Also, for the SAT, they have partnered with Khan Academy to offer free official SAT practice on there. They have practice problems and videos. What is also really cool is if you take the PSAT, you can connect your PSAT score with Khan Academy. And then what it does is it actually prescribes and adapts to your score that you specifically had and gives you specific practice for that. The other cool thing about Khan Academy, which is very unique and I love it, is you can actually schedule out practicing. So you can say, okay, I'm taking the SAT in December and it's August right now. So that gives me those 4 months to practice. And you say, I want to practice 3 days a week for 20 minutes each day. It will give you a practice schedule and even tell you when to take some practice tests that they have, a part of them, all along there so that you'll be prepared for December. It is really cool. Incredible resource. We do have a couple other resources that are available. It's again on a handout that we have on Google Classroom and on our website. But March to Success is a free SAT and ACT. They have free SAT and ACT practice tests. It is sponsored by the U.S. Army, which I know some people get nervous about. You shouldn't feel nervous about that. There's some great things in there. They have flashcards and all sorts of things. There's also a website called Prep Factory, and while it's not as comprehensive as like Khan Academy, it does have free prescriptive and diagnostic and very brief practice that you can do on a daily basis. So I encourage you to check that out too. You can also purchase books from Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Those are fine too. In fact, on that handout on Google Classroom and on our website, we actually have a couple books that we've suggested. But honestly, what you can get through the ACT Academy and Khan Academy, honestly, is about as good as it can get. So let me give you some final thoughts on all of this stuff about SAT and ACT. First of all, here's a couple things. Don't practice for the PSAT 10 or the pre-ACT. Just walk in and take it. You don't need to take it. I mean, what it actually is good is to walk into the PSAT 10 or the pre-ACT and just see how you do. It's basically like taking your temperature and seeing where you're at right now. Then it gives you an opportunity after that, after you see your score, to see what areas you need to practice before you take the SAT or ACT. If you're taking the PSAT and MSQT, you should practice some for that test. And only because that test does offer a couple scholarship competitions, including the National Merit. So I would practice some for that, but you would want to also practice lots for the SAT or ACT. Now keep in mind, any practice for the SAT is going to prepare you for the PSAT. Any practice for the ACT is going to prepare you for the pre-ACT. But I would spend lots of time trying to prepare for those because colleges still use those to some extent for admissions and for scholarships. I would also encourage you, take both to see which one you do better on. I can tell you so many stories about some students that have taken both and they do significantly better on one than the other. There are some students that do basically the same on both. I can't promise you you're going to do better on one than the other, but take both. I would also encourage you, when you sign up for the test, really just take the essay one time, just in case a college requires it. Colleges increasingly are not caring about the essay or the writing portion of that test because they see it as a manufactured essay. It is what it is, right? So I would at least have an A score in case your college requires it. But don't feel like you have to keep retaking that. And then also be sure to send your free score your oh my goodness, 4 free score sends to colleges every time you take it. It's important to do that because they're free. Every time after that, you have to pay for it. So make sure you do that too. A couple other things. Many colleges are moving to test optional. That's what they call it, meaning uh, you can send your SAT or ACT scores if you want, but you don't have to. And while that's true, and while I encourage you to check out those colleges that do that, because I think that that's actually a good movement, some of those same colleges are still using the SAT or ACT for scholarships. So oftentimes it will still behoove you to send your scores even if you're not using them for admissions. Something else that's really interesting is ACT for this next year, for the 2020-2021 school year, is moving to what's called a super score test. Now, I mentioned earlier that colleges will oftentimes super score it, but ACT is allowing you to go a step farther than that, when that's where, after you've taken the ACT for the first time, you can actually just retake individual sections, not just the whole test. So, like, maybe you just had one section that was really bad. Maybe it was the science section because you weren't prepared for the charts and graphs. Well, you can just retake the science section. It's going to be a lower fee. You go in, you sit just for the science section, and then you're done. Because then what they do is they provide a super score to the college, which it'll show the dates that you took each of the individual sections, but it provides just that score of your best section on each one. So that's pretty exciting. I haven't seen how it's going to work yet because that's new, rolling out this next year, but it's really cool. The ACT is also moving for this coming fall, because of COVID-19, to an online testing option. It won't necessarily be required. Some states it will be required if they're still kind of closed down. But they're offering an opportunity for you to be able to take these tests from home online. I'm sure there'll be a lot of security measures in the place, probably like a lockdown browser. It's going to all be timed, all that stuff. However, that might be kind of a cool opportunity for some of you guys where, driving around on a Saturday might be kind of tough anyways. So that's just a couple other important things to think about as you're going through it. So my final thing is what I mentioned at the beginning with that quote from Mark Twain. It's important to plan. It's important to plan that out starting now. Don't wait on thinking about that until your junior year. If you're a freshman, kind of think about how maybe your sophomore year you want to take the PSAT 10, you take the PSAT and MSQT in your junior year, the pre-ACT in the junior year, and then you take your official test in the spring. Or maybe you want to start that a little bit earlier. I just encourage you to plan it out now, to start now on thinking about that. If you're a junior right now and you're going to be a senior next year, I know that you're in a tough spot because of COVID-19. I understand that. Just know that the colleges also know it, because it's every student across the country. So don't have a lot of anxiety, because most colleges, even schools like University of Washington, University of Oregon, all sorts of schools are saying for this class alone, we're going test optional, or we're allowing you to submit a score later. Just know that it will be okay. It will be okay. If you're a sophomore or freshman, just know this is the time to start thinking about it. So this might have answered a lot of questions that you have. It also might have sparked some other questions. I encourage you, if you have any questions, to reach out to either myself or any of the counselors at CV. We're here to help and support you. Otherwise, just start thinking and planning for it now. And just know it is just a test. But if you approach it in the right way, you'll be able to tackle it really well.